Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. We have a new face joining us if you're watching on YouTube, and a new voice joining us on audio, but I guess also on the YouTube as well. It's Paul Tenorio. Hello, Paul.
Hello, a new but old face. I feel like, well, one, I'm older
A
than I'd
crafty
like
veteran
to,
face.
but like I've been around before. It's just been a long time.
It has, man. It has. You've been sequestered away writing your book. I'm assuming it's now 7,000 pages long, all about Lionel Messi, but also the rest of soccer around the world. Are you covering the entire global history of soccer?
Yeah, it's just 7,000 pages of Gam and Tam actually right now. I'm just
Nice.
trying to
Let's
trying
go.
to get.
Oh man, that's a perfect way to start this show. That's exactly what I would expect it to be, and I think you could probably fill at least 1,000 pages trying to explain.
I mean, that's just the
Gam and
MLS
history
roster rules
thereof.
copy pasted into a longer Google.
Oh my God,
Like this,
no.
let's not pretend like Paul's writing new stuff over here.
That's right. No, people think that's what people when I'm like, oh, how's your book? It's like, oh, like it's good, and they're talking to me about it. It's like, oh, it's all about like MLS roster rules, and I'm like, no. It's not like I'm not here to talk to you about Gam and Tam, but I do want to talk to you about, the U22 initiative. Young money.
What for if you were giving us the elevator pitch for people who haven't heard about it, what is the book most likely to be about? I know you were in the process of writing it.
No, this book is about an unprecedented moment in time for American soccer. You have the Copa America came in 24, the Club World Cup in 25, the World Cup in 2026. The eyes of the footballing world are on the United States, and then Messi arrives to give MLS a runway into that. And it's at a time that is critical for Major League Soccer to figure out its place in this evolving landscape of American soccer. But this book also goes into what that landscape looks like. What is driving the popularity of this sport, and what will that landscape look like coming out of the World Cup in 2026? So it's about Messi arriving here and what it was like when he got here and what it meant at Inter Miami and what it meant for the league. It's about these other areas that have driven the sport's popularity upwards, and the many, many entities that are coming to the United States with more regularity to try to capitalize on that growth and on the potential still for more growth of the popularity of the sport. And I think also kind of how MLS is figuring out what to do with all of that. So hopefully I can paint a really good picture of those conversations at the board level in MLS, at kind of what the experience was like at Inter Miami when Messi showed up, and what it's been like to have him as part of that team as a player and, soon as a team owner. And but then also to go into some of the the other areas of growth, like the Premier League and how it changed soccer on television in this country, Champions League, even things like Welcome to Wrexham and Ted Lasso, and how all these touch points have happened all at once, it feels like, for soccer in this country.
Have you gotten a sense of how much Messi has enjoyed playing in the United States? Like what have his impressions been thus far, from your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I think he's getting out of it exactly what he hoped, which he was very clear about it when he first announced on. If you go back and listen to his interview that he gave when he announced he was coming to the United States, he made it very clear. First of all, that interview was mostly about why he wasn't going to Barcelona, but he talked about the fact that he was looking for balance and an enjoyment of in the game and around the game, but also to be more present with his family. And he certainly has achieved that. He's gotten that balance that he's looking for. You can see it in the bits and pieces of Messi that he does show to the public, which is mostly either playing soccer or being a dad. But when you talk to people who are in that locker room, one thing that stands out about Messi is like he is still super competitive. He still really wants to win. He still cares. So it's not like he's come in and he knows nothing about MLS and he just shows up and plays. Like he wants to know like what are the most important competitions. He knows who, if you go back and look at the interview he gave when they beat Columbus and won the Supporter Shield, in that post-game interview, he talked about, who Columbus was, what they had done the prior season, why it was important to win the game in that place to get a title against that team. Like he is up to speed on this league. He cares. And so I do think he's enjoying it. And, the question now is like, how much, like, what does he want next? And I think that's what this season is about for Messi, right? Because when he arrived, it was about making a first impression, and, Leagues Cup was kind of the focus because it was his first competition. Last season, he had Copa America in the middle of the year, and I think that was a really big goal for him to win another trophy with his country, and it kept him motivated. And then, this year it's like there's not really that thing. So it's like, okay, is it going to be Champions League? Is it going to be, do you prioritize something like the Club World Cup when you're Inter Miami? Probably not. So like, I think the pain of, or the anger of getting eliminated in the MLS Cup playoffs probably gives some motivation. And then there's that one thing that's hovering over him. It's like,
US
how
Open
long?
Cup it is.
How long do you want to go with this thing? How long are you going to keep playing?
Interesting. Fascinating. I'm excited for this book, Paul Tenorio, but I'm also excited to talk to you a little bit about USL, because you said this is a critical time for Major League Soccer with everything that is going on and will be going on soon with the 2026 World Cup. Sounds like it is a similarly critical time for the United Soccer League, who have now announced that they are going to have a D1 league up and operating. Paul, how did you come to break this story, and what are the details that I've left out?
I mean, this is a great example of a little bit of what the book is about. Like, everyone recognizes that this is this critical moment in time for the sport, right? The World Cup presents an opportunity to capitalize on it, the world's biggest event and what will be the greatest sporting event this country has seen. Just like 1994 was the most well-attended World Cup in the history of the World Cup, this one will be all of that and more. What do you want out of it? How do you plan to capitalize on those games being in people's backyards? Everyone is trying to figure that out, and the USL is no different. And so as you make phone calls to people around the country, what are you doing to capitalize on the World Cup? What does this mean for the future of the sport? These conversations are happening at the USL. And that's how you kind of stumble into this story, because, we've known that the USL had been pushing for this idea of promotion and relegation. And this kind of, I don't want to say this came out of it, but it was one of the options when USL was weighing pro-rel. What can we do to expand our brand, to have more relevance in the soccer market, to increase our foothold in the country, to get into new markets, to entice more fans into our stadiums? Going Division One was a way of increasing all of that kind of national relevance and to take the World Cup momentum and seize it. So, it kind of came out of reporting on the book, some of the conversations I was having, and but also it was mostly just like USL deciding like now's the time we're going to announce it and push it. But I think it's a fascinating study in kind of like how these businesses and these leagues are starting to say like, okay, if we're going to make moves, if we're going to do something big, we have to start it right now. We have to do it in this moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul, you talk about in the report that you had when you broke this story about USL looking at a 2027-28 timeline. So that is after the World Cup. At least maybe there's still some warmth. It's not quite striking while the iron's hot, but maybe it'll still be warm at that point. I'm curious from your perspective here, what does the USL really stand to gain from this? You're talking about this being a sort of a big move for them to make and to be labeled as Division One. I think that does matter to a certain extent. On the other hand, there's already a Division One league at the top of the sport in the United States on the men's side. And to me, this feels a little bit like USL sort of rebranding existing markets and like putting a little bow on top of the same thing and kind of trying to pretend that it's different. What in your mind do you think, practically speaking, USL actually stands to gain from this sort of refresh?
Well, it depends. I think it depends on two really, really important things. The first is that it needs to change the infrastructure of the league. So those markets that do go up to Division One, this is about building stadiums, 15,000 seat stadiums, creating permanence in some of these markets that have been successful. And by the way, like, I'm very critical of MLS on a lot of different things. Their way of building up the league to create stability in a sport that never had stability in this country, I think was a great business plan. Like, focusing all of that money on building out stadiums and training facilities, it felt different. Like, I'm from Northern Virginia, DC area. Like, every time I go back to DC, like, the fact that there's a soccer stadium there, it does say something different, right? Like, it means that DC United is a real pro team that's not going anywhere. This league's not going anywhere. It sends a different message to the community.
Taylor's having to hold his tongue from trying to destroy whatever Barbie's wanting to toss out at his own club right now. Keep going.
No, but of course, but like, what the club does with it after that is a totally different conversation. But like, the building of these stadiums allowed MLS to to really, again, create that permanence. USL needs to do that too. Okay. So the most important thing for me of building out this Division One is, does this prompt a push for infrastructure, for bigger stadiums, better stadiums, to give a real community connection to a lot of these teams. I also think, this isn't going to be all USL championship teams that just get rebranded into Division One. I think there will be a push for some level of expansion, or at least some level of new ownership groups and new investment, which I think also is important depending on what that investment looks like. But the other side of this to me is, if this happens without promotion and relegation, it doesn't have the impact it could have or should have. If you do this and you don't do pro-rel, I don't think it really changes the game for USL much at all. Even if you build the stadiums, even if you bring in some top-level investors, there is a real opportunity, a real space for a league like USL to capture new fans by going to promotion and relegation. There is interest in promotion and relegation, in the romanticism around the history of the game and feeling more connected to the global game, and in the drama that pro-rel produces. So if USL does Division One as a first step towards pro-rel, I think this is transformative for the league. If they do Division One and that's the end of the transition and you don't do pro-rel, I think it is, the league's dressed up a little bit more, and not much else comes out of it.
Well, and maybe to dive slightly deeper into that, you talk about in the piece that you wrote how USL had commissioned a study with 21st Group, which does a lot of consultancy, has been in around sports, and they talk about how, pro-rel could be a good way to help grow the USL. Is your sense, Paul, sort of working backwards from what you said, of if the USL goes Division One here and this actually comes to fruition, without promotion and relegation, this is probably not something that has a wide-reaching impact. Is your sense that this is sort of step one towards making the thing that the USL has been very public about for quite some time now into something that is more real?
I think that's the goal. I mean, it just makes too much sense. Here's the reality. Like, it's a similar dilemma to what I've been reporting for The Athletic for a long time, for the book right now. You still have to get owners on board. You still have to get the vote to pass. And last time USL couldn't even get the vote to the board level, right? MLS, every board meeting since Messi has arrived, we've been like, the change is coming. And Nelson Rodriguez walks out after the board meeting, is like, we're going to continue to study things. Ultimately, it's going to fall on the owners to make this decision. But I think that, when you look at the recommendations of 21st Group and AJ Swoboda, who runs the North American side of it, it's very clear they have an understanding of this market. They're not recommending pro-rel, because they think it's cute, right? If you are the USL and you want to break out of this idea of a minor league designation, if you want to be truly competitive in some way with MLS, and you're not going to be competitive dollar for dollar with them. MLS has one of the richest ownership groups in global sports, right? You can't compete with that in that way. Okay, well, what can we compete with them on? How can we attract an audience to our league instead of their league? How can we fill our stadiums and bring people in and say, I am a USL fan, I'm a fan of this team in my market? Well, I think promotion and relegation is a vehicle to do that. We are different than MLS. We are more connected with the global game than MLS. We are opportunity in ways that MLS is not, both from the pro-rel point of view. I think USL has done a nice job of kind of selling that idea already with academy players and young players, that there's more opportunity in USL than there might be in MLS. That's how you do it. So I think it feels like that first step there, but again, it's going to come down to whether the owners in USL can also see that vision and understand that, yes, there is a risk that you'll go down. That's a whole part, a big part of the whole pro-rel thing is the rel part, right? That could happen, but you can either stay in kind of the purgatory in which USL exists now, or you can introduce this concept that could make it much more relevant nationally, which increases the commercial possibilities of the league substantially. Certainly, I think increases their relevance from a media point of view and the media contract, which drives growth of all sports and all leagues. And and maybe that reward is worth the risk of going down.
I think the reward of not being stuck in purgatory is worth the risk, personally, because I think some of this, in my mind at least, and Paul, I'd like to know if you would agree or disagree with this, is about self-preservation from the USL, from just a market share standpoint. We've seen USL teams in the past jump from USL to Major League Soccer once they get the franchise status, and I think for USL, if you are a kind of permanently second division league, you never really have that sense of full stability, because there's always are you guys going to jump ship? Are there going to be other greener pastures that you're going to want to pursue? If you suddenly have D1 sanctioning, even if you aren't able to financially compete with Major League Soccer right away or even ever, it still, to me, means that now you Louisville or you Sacramento or Indianapolis or Phoenix or whomever, you already are at the top tier, and now if we add promotion relegation, if we add some other interesting wrinkles, maybe you're even in a better situation. So I think in that way, to me at least, some of this is about self-preservation and market share.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is about storytelling, right? Like, sports is storytelling. How do we get people interested in our league and our team to come to the stadium, to turn on the television and watch this game? What compels you to care? That ultimately has to be the question you're asking if you're Major League Soccer, the Premier League, any league in the world. You're saying, okay, what is our story? Why should people tune in? And USL has to ask themselves that question. Like, right now, if people say to The Athletic, why don't you cover more USL? Okay, well, what is the story you want to cover? Why does a reader in California have interest in Louisville? What can you do to make that league interesting, to make somebody want to talk about you? And it's the same problem MLS faces, right? Like, this is the dilemma for MLS behind the Apple paywall. It's been the dilemma for me covering Major League Soccer my entire career, for you guys too. Like, that there's passion in these pockets, in these markets. Is it enough, right? Is it enough to sell the product? And the answer has been no, right? The TV numbers have not been good enough for the domestic leagues. And so I think both of these American leagues need to be thinking, what do we do to change that equation, to make this league compelling enough for you to watch? And right now, what is USL's story? Well, what would it be if they had ProRel? Like, one of those is very sellable, very sellable. And the other one is, exactly what the USL is now, which is it's a nice community-driven league, right? And that's a great thing about soccer. I'm not trying to knock that. I think the best thing about soccer and the best thing about sports is when teams create real connections to their communities. That is what matters the most. But for the survival of the league and for a league to thrive, it needs to have some level of national relevance, in my opinion. Certainly in the way the business works now, which is driven by media rights deals, right? So, I think it's a chance for USL to take its strength, to go into these markets where you can have this high level of passion in these markets that otherwise maybe don't have pro sports or are looking for ways to kind of latch onto something, and then to elevate it, and to elevate it in a way that's proven to drive interest, which is promotion and relegation. We know that fans like that.
I think fans like it. I think non-fans would really enjoy it. I think if you're an American who has some understanding of ProRel or some understanding of world soccer, you're kind of nominally interested. But I think once it's on U.S. shores and if you're in a community where it's possible for relegation or promotion, I just think so many of my friends who don't quite get into soccer would appreciate the, I guess, ruthlessness of a ProRel system, and I think would kind of have a begrudging respect for it. So I think in that way, USL would be able to differentiate even more. I thought it was interesting in their introductory comments, in their press releases and the like, I feel like taken pains to not fire shots across the bow of Major League Soccer. It feels like they've been very sort of, we're not trying to compete with them necessarily. We're not trying to go at them. What has been Major League Soccer's response to this, as you've understood it?
I mean, nothing right now. I mean, I think they don't want to breathe life into it, right? If you're MLS, your best play is probably to just kind of pat USL on the head and keep doing what you're doing. That's probably the smart play. I wonder, I'll be interested to see, the MLS season opens this weekend. Don Garber is usually on a little bit of a tour to different games on that opening weekend and is available to media members typically at those stadiums. Will he face questions about this for the first time, and what will his response be? Because if we remember last year, I was in Miami for the opening game of the season. Don Garber was there. He sat down for a round table with reporters, and there were two very hot topics at the start of last season. The first was the replacement referees, which Garber talked about in some detail, and wasn't happy about, kind of the discussion around it at that point in time. And the other was USL, right? Because it was about the US Open Cup, and the USL had kind of had some little barbs towards MLS about the way a US Open Cup was being treated. And, he didn't mince words, right? He said, like, we are responsible for a large part of the growth of USL because we put our second teams in that league and we helped it grow. And I thought that was really interesting that he didn't really bite his tongue in that moment. So I'd be interested to see if like the beef is still there strong enough between USL and MLS that Don goes a similar path in this opening weekend.
I'll sort of stick with that MLS theme, Paul, and I'll admit this is sort of a self-interested question, wearing my Phoenix Rising hat, but Taylor got to do his DC United thing when I made him do it just a second ago, so I feel good about it. I'm curious, MLS has been not exactly forthcoming when it comes to their expansion plans, and it seems like things have kind of been a little fluid on that front, and I understand when there's large sums of money involved that is sort of how those things go. Do you have a sense of how MLS might feel about USL kind of semi-locking up markets like Phoenix and Las Vegas that have flirted with MLS bids before? Sacramento is the furthest along of any of these. Do you think that if there is something that's going to trouble MLS about this outside of the pro-rel element and maybe losing some of that storytelling market share, do you think MLS is like serious about maybe trying to protect some of those markets, or do you think those are going to go the way of the USL?
I think certainly, I don't think they're worried about it, right? Because in their mind, the level of investor that they're looking for is at a different level, right? So like if they're going to move to Phoenix, they need an owner who's capable of building a domed stadium, which is $1 billion venture, on top of whatever fee that owner is going to have to pay, which is, by the way, the USL selling point of this Division I league. Like, okay, you want entry into the top tier of pro soccer in America? Well, how about $150 million entry point, expansion fee plus stadium versus $1.5 billion, right? Much different ask. But I think certainly MLS is going to. I wouldn't be surprised if this compelled MLS to push forward to be a little bit more aggressive about some of its plans. If it does have an intention to go to Phoenix or Vegas or Indianapolis, if it needs to kind of find those whales, those billionaires who are going to be the ones putting teams there, that push might happen. But right now, MLS has to be focused on the bigger picture for the league rather than on any specific markets. Like, MLS has not been able to make a decision about what it wants to do next, what the next phase of MLS growth looks like. That decision has to happen very, very soon if they are going to take advantage of the World Cup. And, they've introduced this idea recently in public comments, which I find a bit ridiculous, which is like this notion that, I know it's romantic to link change to the World Cup, but like we're not necessarily tied to that timeline. Like that's absurd. Like we know that there are more eyeballs around the sport coming off of a World Cup. Like that is statistically true. So if you're going to leverage this thing that you've been talking about leveraging for a decade now, then you need to make some decisions. And right now, I think that is the focus of MLS. I do think they recognize that they have pushed things to the very, very deadline, and they've got to make some determinations of, okay, this is what we're going to do to change or update the league, but also like this is the way we sell a new MLS. Because again, in my opinion, at least, it comes down to storytelling. And I think MLS has done a really poor job of storytelling to a wider audience. It's done a really nice job of storytelling in markets, especially in expansion markets, of like, this is a great product. This is a lot of fun at the stadium. It's a different experience than you get at other sports. And they've done a really nice job of putting that in-stadium experience in front of consumers. But what are you doing to convince the kind of casual soccer fan and strong sports fan that MLS is relevant, right? That MLS is better than what they think it is. And a lot of those fans think it's a minor league compared to Europe. They think it's way, way, way off the level. And they need to close, I call it all the time, a perception gap. They need to focus on how do you close that gap and how do you bring in new fans to the product. That's the discussion happening at the board level in MLS. And you know, again, they're on deadline right now if they're going to take advantage of the World Cup.
If the Chicago Fire go out and win the 2026 World Cup, do you think that puts them on the map a little bit more in Major League Soccer?
I mean, there's no other way to put yourself
That's
on a map than to win a world. I mean, think about it, you know?
If they do that, I'm going to need Bastian Schweinsteiger to come back for the trophy celebration and parade. Until that happens, Paul Tenorio, I'm going to assume you will be writing a book, so we appreciate you taking a break from that writing and from raising children to talk to us today. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat, my friend.
Always, always lovely to see you guys, and I appreciate you bringing me on and letting me ramble, per usual.
And triggering me about DC United. You ticked all the boxes. Nicely done.
Should I bring up the Richmond Kickers next? Do you have beef there too, or are we good? Are we good on that front?
I'm not crazy about the new logo.
Okay.
To answer you honestly.
That's the right take.
But I don't hate it. It's fine. They're fine. Whatever. It's cool. They're going to be great. You can't sit in half the stadium still, but don't worry about it. It's cool. Paul Tenorio, thank you as well, my friend. Joe Lowry, thank you. Listeners, thank you all. Richmond Kickers, thank you all. Longest continually operating professional soccer team in the country. There we go. They give them their proper billing. We'll talk to you all again very soon.